Imagine waking up, typing your first search of the day, and nothing loads. No results. No Gmail. No YouTube. Just silence. On August 16th, 2013, Google went offline for only 2 minutes. But in that blink, global internet traffic dropped by 40%. Stock markets trembled, and millions of people realized just how much of their lives were tied to one search bar. The real story of those 120 seconds is stranger than you think, and it left a scar the internet still carries today. It was a quiet Friday evening in Mountain View, California, when the first alerts came in. Not from engineers, not from server logs, but from ordinary people across the globe typing "weather tomorrow" or "pizza near me" and being met with nothing. At exactly 7:52 p.m. UTC on August 16, 2013, Google's vast network, spanning search, Gmail, YouTube, and countless other services, flickered out. No warning. No error message. Just a spinning cursor and the unnerving emptiness of a page that refused to load. For most of us, the internet feels like a sprawling, decentralized ocean. But in reality, much of the world's daily activity flows through a handful of choke points, and Google is the largest of them all. When those servers went dark, the effect was instantaneous and shocking. Global internet traffic plunged by 40% in a matter of seconds. Inside Google's data centers, engineers were already in crisis mode. Their monitoring dashboards, usually a glowing landscape of greens and yellows, were erupting in flashing reds. CPU utilization dropped to near zero, and hundreds of millions of active connections were terminated mid-process. Meanwhile, in London, financial analysts watched something unprecedented. Automated trading bots, reliant on Google's instant feeds for news and data, began hesitating. A few froze entirely. Some switched to backup data streams, but in that critical gap, thousands of microtransactions were abandoned. The irony? To the average person, 120 seconds doesn't sound like much. 2 minutes is barely enough to boil water for tea. But in the hyper-connected nervous system of the modern world, 2 minutes without Google was like cutting power to the brain of the internet. In New York, emergency dispatchers noticed an odd surge in 911 calls, people reporting the internet is broken. One operator later admitted she thought it was a prank until multiple tech-savvy callers described the same thing. Google's gone. Not just slow, gone. In Mumbai, students trying to submit online exams hit dead ends. In Tokyo, navigation systems integrated with Google Maps froze mid-route, leaving some drivers stranded in unfamiliar neighborhoods. Even in remote parts of Africa, where connections were already fragile, the outage was felt. Villagers using Android phones for payments and market prices found their apps stuck on loading. And yet, despite the chaos, there was something eerie about it. Google's core infrastructure had never failed like this before. Not in one country, not in one continent, but worldwide. It wasn't a simple power outage or a single undersea cable cut. It was as if someone had flipped a switch simultaneously across the globe. Inside the company, engineers scrambled to trace the cause. One theory, whispered but not officially, confirmed, suggested a misconfiguration during a routine update propagated instantly through Google's backbone. Another darker theory, mentioned in hushed tones in security circles, hinted at the possibility of a coordinated cyber attack that had been quietly repelled before the public could notice the full scope. Those 2 minutes eventually ended. The search bar came back to life. YouTube videos started playing again. Gmail inboxes refreshed with a backlog of delayed messages. For most users, it was just a weird glitch to laugh about later. But for the people who understood how close the internet came to a deeper collapse, August 16, 2013, became a date they would never forget. Because if it could happen once, For 2 minutes, it could happen again. And next time, it might last far longer. In the days that followed, a question lingered. What really happened during those 120 seconds? The answer, as it turned out, would be far stranger than anyone outside Google was ready to believe. When Google came back online at 7:54 p.m. UTC, relief rippled through the digital world. But the chaos didn't end just because the search bar loaded again. Those 2 minutes had set off a chain reaction, one that would continue to unfold. For hours, and in some cases, days, the internet is like a living organism, with countless systems connected by invisible threads. Cut one of those threads in just the right place, and you don't just damage it, you cause a cascade of failures. That's exactly what happened. First came the financial aftershocks. The instant Google went down, automated trading platforms that relied on Google Finance feeds either froze or defaulted to outdated information. When services came back, they didn't all sync at once. In some cases, price updates came in sudden bursts, triggering algorithmic overreactions. Stock prices for certain small companies spiked or plunged without warning, leaving human traders scrambling to figure out if the movements were real. Then came the advertising collapse. Google's ad network is the beating heart of much of the modern web, powering millions of sites. During the outage, ad-serving scripts failed, and many websites saw their layouts break completely. Images replaced with empty frames, articles pushed out of alignment. Even after Google was restored, the analytics systems that advertisers depended on were missing chunks of data, making it impossible to know how much revenue had truly been lost. By late evening, the effects were reaching the physical world. Delivery. Companies whose routing software depended on Google Maps experienced delays. Thousands of packages missed their drop-off windows because drivers lost GPS-assisted guidance mid-route and were forced to navigate manually. In some cities, food delivery services faced a similar issue. Orders vanished from tracking systems, and meals that should have arrived hot showed up cold, if they arrived at all. The outage also exposed just how dependent emergency systems had become on Google's infrastructure. In certain regions, even emergency dispatch maps used Google's APIS, meaning operators briefly lost live location data. It didn't cause any confirmed fatalities, but several reports surfaced of ambulances arriving minutes later than they should have. And yet, beyond the economic and logistical fallout, there was a psychological shift happening. Social media platforms lit up with posts that were half jokes, half panic. Tweets read, "Google's down, I'm scared." Memes popped up instantly, some showing the search bar as a 404 not found tombstone. But hidden in the humor was an underlying unease. If something as huge and stable as Google could vanish even for 2 minutes, what else could? Inside Google's Network Operations Center, the team had moved past immediate recovery and was now focused on root cause analysis. Every log file, every line of code pushed in the previous 24 hours was under review. The pressure was intense. The company had to release a public statement, but they couldn't afford to say the wrong thing. Too vague, and conspiracy theories would spread. Too detailed, and they might expose security vulnerabilities. The official explanation, released 24 hours later, was bland. A series of server configuration errors caused a brief service disruption affecting multiple Google products. The issue was quickly identified and resolved. But outside the press release, engineers were still debating whether the explanation was the whole truth. Some swore they saw traffic patterns consistent with a coordinated probe, the kind hackers use to map a network's weak points. If that was true, it meant the outage wasn't just an accident. It was a warning shot. For the average user, the incident faded from memory quickly. The memes stopped. The stock market stabilized. Deliveries got back on track. But for those who had been in the trenches, both inside Google and in industries that rely on it. The outage left a permanent mark. Because in the end, the scariest part wasn't losing Google for 2 minutes. It was realizing how easily it could happen again, and how much worse it could be next time. When the dust settled in the Network Operations Center, there was one thing every engineer wanted: answers. The official configuration error story was fine for the press, but internally, no one was satisfied. 2 minutes of total blackout wasn't just rare. It was nearly impossible without something extraordinary happening, buried deep inside Google's internal data archive. A systems engineer named Priya stumbled across log 723B, a record automatically generated by one of the company's lesser-known monitoring systems. This wasn't your standard traffic log. It was an advanced diagnostic tool meant to detect anomalies outside the usual network behavior. And it was blinking red. At first glance, the log looked like static, bursts of incomprehensible numbers and timestamps. But as Priya dug deeper, she noticed something disturbing. Several access requests had originated from IP addresses that shouldn't exist. Not unknown IPs, but mathematically invalid ones. Normally, that would indicate a bug, maybe an error in the timestamping system. But the timing of those invalid requests lined up exactly with the second the outage began. Priya called over her colleague, Miguel, one of the security team's senior analysts. Together, they ran the IP data through an internal tracing tool. Instead of pointing to a location, the tool returned the same message every time: nitrogen monoxide route found. That's not possible, Miguel muttered. Every packet has a route. Unless, Priya thought, the packets weren't coming from within the Internet as they knew it. Meanwhile, outside Google, a handful of cybersecurity researchers had also noticed something strange during the outage. Among them was Ethan Clark, an independent security analyst known for poking at the edges of the Internet's infrastructure. He had captured his own network data during the blackout, and it showed something eerily similar: data pings that didn't conform to any known protocol. By now, Google's legal team had started circling, warning engineers not to speculate irresponsibly about the cause. They were instructed to stick to the public story and keep all discussions internal. But Priya couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a simple misconfiguration. She and Miguel decided to dig anyway, working after hours. Over the next week, they mapped every abnormal packet from log 723B, trying to see if they formed a pattern. And they did, a repeating sequence of 12 values that looked more like a cipher than random noise. One night, Miguel joked, "What if it's a message? Like someone or something tried to talk to Google, and the system didn't know how to handle it." Priya didn't laugh, because the more she stared at the pattern, the more it seemed intentional. Not human-readable, but not meaningless either. Something had reached into the heart of one of the most powerful networks on Earth, stayed just long enough to shut it down, and then vanished, leaving only a string of numbers as its calling card. The strangest part? The log showed no record of the packets ever leaving. They had arrived, caused disruption, and then simply ceased to exist. Priya sent an encrypted message to Ethan, attaching part of the sequence. He replied within hours, "This isn't just Google." The same signature appeared in my logs from 2 other networks on different continents, weeks before your outage. That meant one thing: this wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of something larger, something moving quietly across the global Internet. Priya, and Miguel knew they couldn't raise this officially without proof. But the more they dug, the more they realized that the 2-minute Google blackout might have been just the first visible ripple of a much deeper event. And if that was true, they hadn't seen the last of those impossible packets. It happened just 11 days later. Priya was at her desk, staring at yet another wall of logs. When the status board at the far end of the Network Operations Center flashed read, this time, the outage wasn't just Google Search. It was Gmail, YouTube, and cloud services all at once. But it didn't last 2 minutes. It lasted 35 seconds, which was long enough for the same fear to ripple across the internet again. Inside the NOC, chaos erupted. Engineers scrambled to reroute services, isolate failing systems, and reassure panicked clients. But Priya's eyes weren't on the failing services. They were locked on the diagnostic terminal running. Log 723B, and there it was. The same. Invalid IP signature had appeared. Same 12-value sequence. Same impossible route. But this time, the packets were moving faster, almost twice the speed as before, and arriving from multiple origins simultaneously. Miguel rushed over, already pale. "It's not just us," he said, holding up his phone. A secure channel was lighting up with alerts from major infrastructure providers in Singapore, Frankfurt, and São Paulo. They had experienced their own glitches, not enough to take them fully offline, but enough to trigger emergency protocols. The global internet wasn't being attacked in the traditional sense. This was something else, as if a single entity was touching the world's largest networks in quick succession, like a hand brushing across piano keys. Priya's mind raced. If this was a coordinated cyber attack, it didn't fit any known pattern. Attackers didn't tap and leave without a payload, unless they were probing for weaknesses. Or testing. Pull up the deep packet capture. She told Miguel. The raw data wasn't supposed to make sense without hours of analysis, but they didn't have hours. Yet there it was, the 12-value sequence again, only now. At the end, 2 new values had been appended, like an unfinished sentence being extended. What if it's building something? Miguel whispered. Piece by piece, every time. It shows up? Before Priya could answer, Ethan Clark's name flashed on her encrypted messenger. His message was short and unnerving. It's here again. And it's not just hitting infrastructure. I've got reports it touched an undersea cable relay in the Atlantic. That made no sense. Undersea cable relays didn't talk to the open internet. In the same way, they were part of the invisible backbone of global communications. To interact with them, you'd have to have physical-level access or something operating at a protocol layer. Most engineers never even see 35 seconds. After it began, the outage stopped. Services returned. Publicly, it was framed as a brief internal disruption. But in private channels, whispers were growing louder. Some thought it was the work of an advanced state actor, a government running a stealth operation. Others feared it was something far stranger, a rogue AI buried in the world's network fabric, surfacing in unpredictable bursts. Priya didn't know which theory scared her more. Later that night, she and Miguel compared the sequences from both outages. When overlaid, the numbers formed a grid, and in that grid, Miguel spotted something chilling, a repeating diagonal pattern, too precise to be random. Ethan's final message for the night didn't help. I think it's trying to talk to all of us at once. And next time, it won't just be seconds. Priya stared at the dark terminal in front of her. Somewhere out there, something was waking up, and the internet was just its first whisper. It didn't come at peak hours this time. It came at 3:11 a.m., when most of the world was asleep and network traffic was at its lowest. Priya was at home, slouched on her couch with cold coffee, reviewing packet logs from the last incident when her phone buzzed once, an encrypted ping from Miguel. It's happening. She didn't even change out of her hoodie. She grabbed her laptop, logged into the NOC remotely, and froze. This wasn't just Google or a few cloud services. This time, entire sectors were going dark in microbursts. Stock exchange servers in New York, weather satellites over Europe, aviation control networks in Southeast Asia. Not all at once, but in perfect rhythm, Like? Someone flicking lights on and off in a predetermined sequence. The 12-value signature had grown again. This time, there were 14 values. And as Priya stared at them, she realized something she hadn't before. If she converted the values into ASCII, they formed letters. Not all of them were readable, but enough to make out a word, W-A-I-T. Stomach dropped. Is it talking to us? Miguel's voice cracked over the secure call. I think it's telling us something, Priya said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. But why would it need 3 separate incidents to say? One word? Ethan Clark broke into the call, his voice tight. Because it's not just us it's talking to. It's talking to every major network operator in the world. The sequence is being split across incidents. We're all holding pieces of the same message. And then Priya understood. The outages weren't attacks. They were delivery points. This thing was scattering a message across the globe, one fragment at a time, relying on the humans at the other end to piece it together. The problem was, what if some of those humans weren't friendly? The outage lasted exactly 58 seconds, long enough for every global network hub to get its piece. By dawn, Priya's secure channels were flooded with decoded fragments. Not ready. You must wait. They are watching. It read like something between a warning and a plea. And then came the kicker. An anonymous source from a Pacific cable operator claimed their fragment contained GPS coordinates in the middle of the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the ocean. Priya sat back, her hands cold on the keys. An origin point? A meeting place? Or something buried there, far below the reach of most technology? Except, apparently, this. Ethan's final call to her that morning was short. We've got a choice. Ignore it and hope it stops. Or go. Find out what's at those coordinates before someone else does. Miguel's voice followed, quieter, almost resigned. If this thing wanted to hurt us, it's had 3 chances. Maybe it's on our side. Priya looked out her window at the still sleeping city, servers humming invisibly in every building, the internet pulsing like a living organism. For the first time, she wondered if the network wasn't just carrying life. Maybe, in some way, it was life. And maybe, just maybe, it wanted to talk. Sometimes, the most powerful messages aren't shouted. They're whispered across the world's networks in ways only a few can hear. If the internet itself reached out to you, would you answer? Drop your answer in the comments, and let's see who's brave enough to reply.